South Park is full of absolute chaos, and although the main focus of the show is the kids, oftentimes the parents are the cause of that chaos. From misunderstandings to riots to full-on war with other countries, everything imaginable that could go wrong finds a way to go wrong. But in times of trouble, who else can you rely on other than your parents? Today, we'll be breaking down South Park's parents and trying to figure out who are the best and who are the absolute worst. I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is South Park Parents, Best to Worst.
How did I manage to raise such a smart kid?
And before we begin, we just want to make things clear. We'll be ranking parents together as a team. We want to know which South Park kids have the best parents and which have parents that are totally crazy. Now let's get started. As usual, we'll be dividing our list into 3 sections: the good, the gray, and bad to evil. Now let's start with the good. In the best of the good parents, we have Steven and Linda Black. Parents to Token Black, they work hard to provide a good life for themselves and their son.
Son, can you just hurry it up? I don't think we quite fit in here.
They try to help their son when he begins to be self-conscious about being more well-off and clearly took something from the experience, still doing small things to make him feel more like his peers, like watching pandering television and eating just macaroni and cheese for dinner. They clearly care for their son a lot, making sure he's healthy and happy, in spite of the dysfunction around them, and instilling good values into him, which actually really shows, because all the kids in South Park, Token is actually presented as one of the most mature and well-adjusted, which suggests that his parents have done a good job raising him. In fact, his family life seems to be far more normal than the other kids in the neighborhood, so good job to them. Moving on to the silver medal for good, we have Jimmy's parents, Ryan and Sarah Vollmer. It isn't easy raising a child with special needs, but thanks to their love and support, Jimmy grew to be friendly and optimistic. They take a grounded approach when confronting their son over anything. For example, sitting down to discuss his behavior when he accidentally joined a violent gang.
Your mother and I have noticed a change in your behavior.
Or being upfront when they think he's indulging in, well, typical things a young man does alone.
Jimmy, were you masturbating?
You know, that's actually pretty awkward. But they mean well. They aren't always as involved as they should be, but still, A for effort. Next, we have Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez. Restaurant owners relatively new to South Park, they moved from Boise to give a better life for their son. They expect a lot from him at a young age, juggling school, a social life, and working in the family restaurant, but you know, it makes sense. They clearly devoted a lot of time and energy into a business and learned how to dedicate themselves in order to be successful, something they want to pass on to their child. So it's obvious that they want their son to have pride in his family and the work that will someday be passed down to him. His father in particular seems nervous about angering potential customers, telling David not to anger Cartman since he was a Yelp reviewer.
No 1-star, please!
But starting over in a new community must have been a stressful enough experience without the review bombarding. Cartman is evil.
Do you ride your tiny bicicleta?
Next are Heidi's parents, Mr. and Nancy Turner. They aren't shown very much, but we see enough of them to know they're very protective. During their daughter's slumber party, Nancy states she invited Margarine out of sympathy for the little girl being new to town and not having any friends yet, not realizing it was Butters. In the same episode, Mr. Turner is seen guarding the house to keep any boys at bay.
Ha! I knew it! Boys at the slumber party!
His methods were obsessive, with most agreeing using binoculars is a little much, but he meant well. Our next choice may be a surprise, but we're gonna go with Laura and Thomas Tucker. Craig is a bit of a troublemaker without a doubt. He doesn't care for authority and has no issues simply flipping people off rather than actually talking to them. The family is dysfunctional at times, scolding each other at the dinner table and flipping the bird frequently to express anger and irritation. But we rank them this high because they also taught their son some great values. Thomas shows pride in hearing his son getting into fights and winning, but he also eventually comes around after believing Craig is gay. Next are Roger and Betsy Donovan. Roger we don't see too much of, aside from an occasional small speaking role, but Clyde's mother is another matter. She passes away relatively early in the series, and it clearly impacted Clyde a lot. She guilted him about leaving the toilet seat up all the time, even coming to his school to yell at him for it, and it was ultimately what killed her. She appears to Clyde one last time, begging him to not let it happen to anyone else, which just resulted in giving her son a traumatic scar for the rest of his life, blaming himself for his mother's death, and scold him only to prevent him from getting hurt or hurting others. But still, What a way to go. And that pretty much wraps up our good parents. Now we're moving on to the gray area. And starting out with our gray area, we're going to have to place the Stevens and the Testaburgers together. They're hit or miss when it comes to parenting in their own ways, so it was hard to dub one couple worse than the other. For the Stevens, they allowed their daughter to cave to the pressure of being a stupid, spoiled whore and let her host a horribly inappropriate party. I mean, this is really pretty screwed up to say the least. For Wendy, her parents are clearly moral and upfront, but they also cave a lot to the masses and popular belief. Mr. Testaburger is even willing to be a sugar daddy to two underage girls right in front of his daughter.
I'll help make you the stupidest, most spoiled of them all.
Again, really screwed up stuff. We can at least say that Baby and Wendy have picked up some leadership skills from their mothers and have been raised to help their peers rather than tear them down.
Wendy, we're sorry we called you names. Like not stupid and not spoiled.
So all in all, when you look past some of their worst moments, it appears they've done quite a bit right. Next, we have PC Principal and Strong Woman. Parents by accident, they have a weird way of raising their kids. Because they aren't given enough time to have a mature relationship between them, both professionally and personally, they end up having to raise kids before being ready.
You better watch your microaggressions, bro.
While PC Principal shouldn't be beating up children, then again it was Cartman, he at least steps up as a father, regardless of the fact that Strong Woman was trying to do everything on her own.
I have worked my whole life to be the strongest woman possible.
They both were clearly doing what they thought best, which says a lot for their character. Should they have let their kids be exposed to fame at such a young age? No, but you have to hand it to those kids. They were determined. Next, we have to include Mr. and Mrs. Garrison Sr. When you're parents to the erratic, perverted, and out-of-control Mr. Garrison, it's easy to see some wrong choices were made. Now, because we know so little about them, we can only judge and place them based on what we've seen. They're seen early in the series, and it's expressed that they had a loving and pretty much perfect home life. But that didn't mean Mr. Garrison Jr. was okay with that. When he visits them while chaperoning a school trip, he guilts his father about not having abused him growing up, demanding to know if it was due to him being unattractive. You can't help but feel bad for Garrison Sr. when he gets the guilt trip from not only his unstable son, but also from his wife. Your son tricking him into thinking it's his father, but at least it wasn't as disgusting as it could have been. I guess. The next one was a tough call, but we're gonna have to give this spot to Richard and Mrs. Tweak. They just barely made the neutral part of our ranking, since they have a very shady business practice of sneaking meth into their coffee to get people hooked on it.
Made with ingredients from local tweakers.
And the real reason they can be ranked this high is due to how they're shown to treat their son. They use his panic attacks to their advantage when guilt tripping, which is pretty terrible. His horrible anxiety seems to be the direct result of all the coffee they give him too, which is seriously a bit negligent. They support his relationship with Craig wholeheartedly, which is nice.
We're so proud of you, Tweak.
But that doesn't mean they should have used having a gay son as a sort of status symbol. But in a society where children are cast out due to who they're attracted to, this likely came as a relief to their anxious son. And with that, we've wrapped up the gray area. We now get to the dark side. These parents have a lot of problems. They range from bad to awful to pure evil. Starting out the dark side, we have Randy and Sharon. In all honesty, their ranking is weighed down overwhelmingly by Randy's craziness.
Yeah, Stan, why don't you go upstairs and play with yourself?
In fact, oftentimes, Sharon ends up being the voice of reason to balance out her husband's irresponsible behavior. And truthfully, they both clearly care for their children, but they have different ways of expressing it. Randy is always dragging his family through ridiculous situations, from causing panic over global warming, to flooding a theater which resulted in the death of a small boy, to running a pot farm. Then there's the fact that he's prone to getting into fights with other dads at his son's sports games, drives drunk with his son and his son's friends in the car, and causes all sorts of riots across South Park.
There's a reason God made our is like little hoses.
In a weird way, he doesn't see much of this as dangerous or bad, so his intentions aren't necessarily the worst. But he makes some pretty reckless parenting choices, to say the least. Sharon, on the other hand, while she does have the steadier head on her shoulders, also caves to Randy a lot, and stays with him simply because it was more comfortable than moving on. And although you can't blame her for what Randy does, she does let him get away with quite a bit. And finally, something worth noting about Sharon, when she thought Stan murdered someone, her first instinct was to bury and hide the body. I don't know what that says about her morality, but it says a lot about her loyalty to her children. Next, we have Linda Cartman. Single mother and father to her son Eric, She's so lonely, she tries to be more a friend to her son than a parent. She's radical antics. She's been featured in who knows how many adult videos, leaving an emotional scar on her son. And because she allows him to stay deluded, he can never admit when he's wrong. We know he tries to be firmer in later episodes, scolding Eric over his language and misdeeds towards his friends. But she let so much slide for so long, it's tough to see any recovery. We've been shown throughout multiple episodes that the reason why Cartman is such a monster is because his mother has allowed him to get away with anything.
Yes, darling. You can have whatever you want.
Which ultimately turned him into a narcissist. But that said, her intentions are pure. She really does seem to think she's doing what's right, and she does show love to her son, but still, she's created a monster.
I am a cop, and you will respect my authority.
The bronze medal for worst parents goes to the Broflovskis, Gerald and Sheila. What can we say about these two? One started a war with Canada, the other a war with Denmark. But at least Sheila didn't try to get her youngest son to take the fall. For being the troll that harassed a woman so much, she took her own life.
Hey, Ike, just stay calm and act like I'm yelling at you, okay, pal?
They both clearly have issues, but it's awful how they grow to treat their kids. Sheila is never willing to hear Kyle out, despite the young kid being in the right when his mother goes off the deep end. Ironically, with Kyle being the voice of reason in the show, more often than not, his mother never listens to him. She believes any of Gerald's lies, and while smart, can be incredibly naive. Gerald has definitely grown to be the worst of the two, harassing women and young girls for kicks, berating his oldest son, and guilting his youngest son. He likely can't be redeemed at this point. Next, we have Kenny's parents, Stuart and Carol, taking the silver medal for worst parents. Not much to say about these two. When on screen, they are usually seen screaming at one another and getting into physical fights. They make and distribute meth, in and right outside the family house, barely make enough to feed and clothe their children, and curse their oldest son when they join the cult in their own youth.
Did that really just happen?
I don't think so.
Even after having their children taken away during a domestic dispute, they still don't show any improvement and continue to be toxic influences in their kids' lives. They're suggested to be physically abusive and without a doubt negligent. Their bitterness is also directed at their kids. And frankly, Kenny, being the sweet angel that he is, deserves so much better. So who can possibly be more worse than cooking meth and starting wars? Who takes the gold medal for the worst parents in South Park? We have to give it to Steven and Linda Stotch. Butters' parents. It's a running gag in the show that Butters gets grounded for anything